The man who murdered an Air Force veteran and a retired police officer in Winthrop over the weekend was likely driven by hate. That's according to Suffolk County District Attorney Rachael Rollins, who said in a statement that law enforcement, who are investigating the attack as a hate crime, have unearthed troubling white supremacy rhetoric and statements written by the shooter. On Saturday, 28-year-old Nathan Allen stole a box truck from a plumbing company, crashed it into a house on Shirley Street. Then, officials say he walked off and passed multiple other people who were not black before shooting 60-year-old former Air Force Staff Sergeant Ramona Cooper and 68-year-old retired State Trooper David Green repeatedly. That's when a police sergeant, who thought he was responding just to a car crash, ran in, shooting and killing Allen after he refused to drop his gun. In her statement, Rollins emphasized the moments before the shooter opened fire, saying he walked away from the wreckage, interacting with multiple individuals and choosing only to shoot and kill the two black people he encountered. The district attorney joins me now. Rachael Rollins, thank you very much for giving me some time.
Of course.
I mentioned that you're investigating this as a hate crime. Could you tell me what facts specifically got you there?
The writings of this individual. Our Mass State Police Sergeant Detective has been working around the clock to find out more about Nathan Allen and what this person was driven by, what he believed, and what the evidence shows us. And so the state police, with the able help of the Winthrop Police Department, with our federal law enforcement partners as well, is slowly starting to peel back layers to find out a little bit more about this individual. So it's his writing, but then it's also factually what actually occurred there. If he walked by multiple people that were not visible people of color and spared their lives, but only chose to target these two, I think those two things combined make us comfortable at this point saying we believe he was motivated by hate.
What specifically did he say about black people and Jews, District Attorney?
So we'll be, I think, releasing a little more information about that, but we know that specifically in his own handwriting, there were swastikas. He talked about the white race being a superior race, whites being apex predators, language like that, hate-filled language, and sort of rantings of a person that, you know, in my opinion, is becoming or has already been radicalized. So there are some concerning pieces of language.
Why does it matter if this is classified as a hate crime if the guy who did the killing is dead and if he acted alone as you believe he did?
It's a really important part of our job, Jim, as district attorneys, no matter whether it's driven by hate or a taking of a life, is explaining to these families who our state police had to call and notify, Trooper Green's family. They had to call and notify Staff Sergeant Ramona Cooper's family. They also had to call and notify Nathan Allen's family. It is putting the pieces together as to what it is the last moments of your loved one's life was, and answering those really awful questions. But there's also a community that has been deeply impacted by this violent outburst and 3 lives lost on Saturday afternoon. So the people of Winthrop, as well as Staff Sergeant Cooper and Trooper Green's family, deserve answers.
But my sense from you is it isn't just those 2 reasons. You seem to believe this is just yet another example of this grotesque behavior that is sweeping this country that sadly was visited on 2 apparently wonderful people in Winthrop the other day. Is that not so?
We have seen, Jim, over the years, right, where we think about the Emmanuel AME Church back in 2015 in Charleston, South Carolina. We think about the Pulse nightclub in Orlando in 2016, 49 killed, right? We think about the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. We think about Walmart in El Paso, 23 dead, right? And we think about Atlanta, right? This is not something where our community in Suffolk County, Northerners as we are, to think, oh, that doesn't happen here, that's just a Southern problem. Or, even looking at the insurrection on January 6th, we believe, oh, we don't know people like that. Those are people that we read about. This has now crept into our community. As Northerners, we are dealing with some of these same issues, and we need to be really honest with each other about that.
Do any of this shooter's writings reference any of these other white supremacist, racist acts in this country?
We are still unearthing a lot of his documents. And remember, we start at the scene and start working our circle larger and larger. So the state police have not only looked at what he had on his person, so with respect to firearms and other things like that, then we go to his home and we are starting to unearth more and more. As we learn more, Jim, we will absolutely be notifying not only the loved ones, but the community. But as of right now, we believe this individual acted alone at this stage in our investigation, but we're going to be seeing whether there were readings, websites, like sort of writings that he himself did or that he was looking at, and whether there are ties to any other known entities.
In your original statement, you mentioned the shooter had a doctorate, he was married, he was employed. Why do we care about that? Why does it matter? Do you worry that in some ways normalizes a killer?
I think we all have implicit bias. I have it, right? As a woman, as a person of color, we all believe we know what domestic violence looks like. We all believe we know what domestic terrorism might look like, or what a terrorist looks like. And whether this is Winthrop or other circumstances we're talking about, we have to recognize that this individual, for all intents and purposes, however we define this, appeared normal, right? He was married. I think there was a write-up about his engagement in the Globe, right? Within the last...
There was a big column about this fantastic story about the wedding happening in front of his wife's grandparent.
Absolutely.
It's shocking.
That can be true, as well as this bubbling right underneath the surface. So I think what we have to do, Jim, is start having some tough conversations about there are people that are educated, that appear outward facingly to be innocuous or, normalized, and they have some really troubling beliefs that they firmly believe. And we have to start having those tough conversations about, race and, inclusion of all types, right? Of people feeling as if they're being left behind or made invisible. And that doesn't mean that we are going to condone violence in this type of rhetoric, but I do think we need to start having these tough conversations, or sadly, we're going to see more of this type of outburst. Jim, this person had no criminal record and went from 0 entries on their criminal record to a double homicide and many other potential crimes as well.
So you don't have, just one final thing, just to be clear, you don't yet have information that gives you insight as to the genesis of this racism and anti-Semitism.
We do
I understand
not.
You have examples of it. Okay, you
but
don't.
we are not. I'm not comfortable yet, and we don't know. As we sit here today, we are still only 3 days from the incident itself, and the state police have been there round the clock with the Winthrop police, Chelsea, Revere, Boston Transit, and NEMLEC, which is the Northeast Mass Law Enforcement Council, have been working round the clock to try to get answers, but we don't have one yet there.
I want to change gears for a couple of minutes. On Friday, Derek Chauvin was sentenced by the judge out there in Minnesota. Here's a little bit of what Chauvin finally had to say, and the judge himself.
At this time, due to some additional legal matters at hand, I'm not able to give a full formal statement at this time. But very briefly, though, I do want to give my condolences to the Floyd family. there's going to be some other information in the future that would be of interest.
The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months.
Yeah, I have no idea what the hell Chauvin was talking about with that future information, but part of sentencing decisions for judges is about deterrence. Do you believe that a sentence that's above the guidelines, 22 and a half years, I know the Floyd family hoped for more, will that have a deterrent effect, or is this an outlier kind of case?
I hope it certainly does, and I believe it will. I mean, the country and the world watched this. I thought the judge did a very good job explaining all of the analysis that went into this, you know, we were watching. And although, yes, the Floyd family might have wanted much more, and certainly they believe, as others do as well, that George's life was worth more than 22 and a half years. But this is an extraordinary sentence, considering it's a member of law enforcement that did not have, you know, a criminal history prior to that. He might have had a lot of entries on his internal affairs and other things like that. But this is an extraordinary sentence. I hope it is a deterrent, and I think it's the beginning of a sea change we're going to see with respect to law enforcement. And there are so many members, Jim, that are actually supportive of this sentence, right? Because he does not represent the overwhelming number of men and women that do this job, like the sergeant in Winthrop that sprinted to the harm, right? To stop a threat to his community and other people. And I do want to say these two Black individuals, they were brothers and sisters. They were daughters and sons of Winthrop. They were loved by the people of Winthrop, even though it is an overwhelmingly white town. Trooper Green and Ramona Cooper, Staff Sergeant Cooper, they were loved. So I think the sentence with Chauvin is just. I think it is extraordinary, and I hope it's the beginning of a lot of deterrence for law enforcement.
I want to play one more clip for you. This is, get your very quick reaction. This is you on WCVB about a week ago on the record discussing Mayor Walsh's appointment of Dennis White. Here's part of what you had to say.
This is a bad situation overall, because either he knew about it and he's lying, or he didn't know about it and you're a terrible manager, right? Aside from mayor, is there anything bigger than the commissioner of the Boston Police Department? And there was no vetting process in this?
Obviously, the it you referenced was the history of domestic violence. So you trash the Secretary of Labor, who was picked by the man who you hope picks you to be the U.S. attorney, leading some to conclude that you're no longer on the short list for that job. And frankly, we all thought at the top of that list. Is that true?
Jim, look, I am the chief law enforcement officer of Suffolk County. I am inextricably tied to the commissioner of the Boston Police Department. When the police arrest, they bring them to us. And when I need somebody arrested, I ask the police to do so. So what I can tell you is the money and time that has been wasted on the Commissioner White situation could have been better spent and used at Mass Ave and Melnia Cass, or for the solving of our over 1,000 unsolved homicides. Are
you still on the short list for U.S. Attorney?
What I can tell you is that I am very happy with the job that I'm doing right now. And I am convinced that being mayor is a hard job. I have respect for Mayor Walsh. I'm just not happy with the fact that we are still dealing with a lot of problems in the Boston Police Department. So I am not concerned.
Are you still on the short list? Are you still on the short list for U.S. Attorney?
What I can tell you is my understanding is there are 3 people on that list, and I believe my name is still one of those 3. But I am very happy with the job that I'm doing right now, and I'm focused exclusively on the 3 people that were murdered, or the 3 homicides that just happened in Winthrop. And I believe that the Secretary of Labor is hopefully focused on all of the work that he's doing for our United States.
Rachael Rollins, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
You bet.